Welcome back to Connections in Flight. I'm Erika Paramore.
And I'm Sarah Mizuguchi.
Join us as we have another meaningful conversation about navigating our current life flight. Sarah?
Hey.
How are you doing this week?
I'm great. I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Traveling much?
I'm traveling actually tomorrow.
Oh.
So
sometimes when we talk, you've just gotten back from a trip. So what's the difference on the day before a trip for you?
Well, it's funny you should ask because I'm really running on adrenaline, I think, today. I've just had one of those weeks, like sweaty palms all week, to be honest.
It's a big trip.
And I've been just one of those weeks, just busy. Good, just busy week. But all good, all good.
Is your carry-on packed?
So I'm going home to pack after this. But interestingly enough, for my carry-on, I'm really trying to build off some of our prior episodes, interestingly enough. I actually went back and re-listened to one of our episodes that we've done. And in that episode, Attachment, we talk a lot about the green ball of yarn and just passing that back and forth and staying in the green. I really, really thought about a lot this week.
The secure attachment bond.
I haven't. So since I'm getting ready to travel tomorrow with my children, it's a big trip. I'm really thinking about how I can stay in the green.
Good for you.
Because we all know I can get a little scared to fly and all that. So in my bag right now is this just a game. It's called Bananagrams.
Oh, I love Bananagrams.
I love Bananagrams too. I learned to play this actually on a mission trip. And ever since then, I loved it. So I'm going to take it with us on this trip. Maybe in the airport, we have one really long layover, but I'm just thinking, how can I keep my ball of yarn green?
So that's to play with your kids?
Yes.
Great.
Because I'm like, I want the ball of green yarn, not like, I don't want to be tossing them like a volcano fireball. So thanks, Erika. I
can't wait to hear how that goes.
I really dug back.
Have they played this before?
We played it one time. And we loved it, and all my kids can get really competitive about it.
Well, and the older they get, I bet it becomes a different game with what they can do with it.
I'm considering this one of my green balls. So thank you, Erika.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it's helpful.
Thank you. Not to dwell on the past episodes, because I know we have a pretty awesome episode today. I'm really excited. I've never met our guest, so that's always such a treat. So what's the word of the day?
This is a word very much, I should say, unlike our other words.
Okay.
The word is investment.
Investment.
And as you know, our guests, they choose the word. We don't know how they're going to talk about it. But this guest has a different kind of energy, a different kind of creativity, a different kind of humor. And our guest today is Christina Geist. And she's accomplished so much. I'm going to just kind of share a little bit of an overview. She tries to leave a positive footprint on her corner of the world using the simplest of tools, her words, which is so perfect with our episodes. I know, right?
That's amazing.
I know. Whether it's as founder and CEO of Boombox Gifts, a service that helps friends and families collaborate digitally to create an heirloom-quality memory box. Gosh, I mean, can't wait to hear about how she came up with that. And also, she's a co-founder of True Geist, which is a branding and design firm. She's a New York Times bestselling picture book author for children's books. And she's married to her high school and college sweetheart, Willie Geist, who many of you all may know from the Today Show. They live in New York with their children, Lucie and George. And full disclosure, Christina and I were sorority sisters in college with Willie. He was there along for the ride too. So I'm just going to tell you, this one's so sentimental to me because hearing her voice again and she was my connection in flight going to college. So I just cannot wait for our conversation.
Wow.
You know, she says that like her whole mission, and I'm going to let her speak more to this, but creating moments through words and storytelling. And I feel like that's what we're doing. So it just feels like such a natural guest to have kind of be a part of our flight today.
Can't wait.
Okay.
All right, let's go.
Let's go. So we're going to kind of just jump in. We know that you have kids coming home, and we're all moms. So
we get it.
Keep the ball rolling.
Yes, we will. So serendipitously, when Erika was talking about you, I had just seen you with the Barefoot Contessa on an episode that you and Willie were on, and I thought you seemed so cool on that episode. And I was like, are you kidding me? Erika, you know her, and we're going to have her on the podcast?
So not only do I know her, I may be referring to her as Shark because, I mean, I don't think I've ever called you Christina, much as Christina Geist. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have like stumbled over that so many times.
It's very funny, and my kids are very perceptible, and they know that when someone calls me Christina and it doesn't sound right, it's because they should be calling me Shark, and they're just they have to call me Christina because they feel like they have to, but you don't have to.
I love it.
Here and now, my old friend, you can call me Shark throughout the podcast. That's up to you. And Sarah, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I do have to say there are pinch me moments that happen with Willie's job, with my husband's job, and that was definitely one of them. To spend the day with Ina Garten was pretty awesome, and she's exactly in real life as you want her to be, and as you believe her to be, which I think is. We've come across a lot of celebrities on this journey, and it's actually nice to know that most of them are who you want them to be, and most of them are real, regular people. And I think, we're all human, and that's why we're here having conversations like this. And no matter who you are, you're sharing in these experiences together. So
absolutely,
thank you both for having me.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I do want to just kind of let listeners know about this is really a sentimental episode for me already, just knowing we're talking. And one of the reasons that I first thought of you when we were talking about influential people and who would make perfect sense for this podcast is that you were my connection in flight when I was being dropped off at college. And you really, we've been talking about in different episodes, secure attachment bonds. You were my ball of green yarn. You were my sounding board. You were my person who just knew exactly when to make me laugh. And I'm really honored to still be talking to you. And it's really meaningful that you're joining us.
It is. I love this. I'm like, could tear up just thinking about college and all of that. So I guess for me, and everyone else listening, Christina, just tell us about you a little bit, like where you're from, where you grew up, and then obviously I know you, Erika, and you all come into each other's life at Vanderbilt. So tell us just a little backstory about yourself.
Absolutely. And that's so sweet of you, Erika. Thank you for saying that. So I am from Ridgewood, New Jersey. I am the second of 4 Sharkey kids. My name is really Christina Sharkey. And I grew up in a very loud, loving household. We're very big personalities. My older sister and I are 3 years apart. My younger siblings are 10 and 11 years younger than me. So we joke about the first family and the second family, even though we're the same family, same parents, same marriage. But yeah, we are a very close-knit family. And then I got, kind of really taken out of my comfort zone to Nashville, Tennessee for college, to Vanderbilt, to show up in such a new environment and to be a Yankee for the first time. I had never identified as a Yankee before. I growing up in New Jersey, you don't realize that you need to defend it or have a thick skin about it until you go show up in other places in the country. And you're like, oh, wait. Oh, I thought you were from, Alabama. I thought we judged you guys, but you're judging me, So it was this really kind of funny experience, but so worthwhile to spend that time in the South and to really realize how much we all have in common, regardless of where you come from. You might sound a little bit different, but we're really all the same. And so that was Vanderbilt was this incredible sort of geographic melting pot for me. And I met Erika a year later in my sorority. She became my little sis. And we, had this great experience in college, and then we all scatter to the wind, right? And this is kind of how it goes. And I've been thinking so much about your podcast and this idea of flight and this idea of this 7-year cycle of your life changing, which I really relate to that because for me, I just end up articulating it a little bit differently because I'm a writer. So I think about it in chapters, and that you have these chapters in your life, which I think you refer to as life cycle changes, right? But whatever your terminology may be, for me, I have these chapters and I've realized from college on that they're all about 4 or 5 years long. And so there was 4 years at Vanderbilt. Then after that, there were 4 years in Boston, where I moved and lived with my best friend from high school. Then there were 4 years in Atlanta, where Willie and I first got married and lived. Then we moved back to New York City for a couple of years and sort of moved back home and lived in Manhattan before we had children. And then we became parents, and now our daughter, our oldest, is 15. But within that 15 years are also these succinct kind of chapters, some of them related to periods of time in my career. So I spent 4 years at home with the kids when they were little. When they were 3 and 1, I kind of jumped ship on my corporate job, and that was a 4-year stint at home. And then I went back to work, and there were 4 years here, 4 years, so it's kind of like when I break it all down and I think about my word and my theme, which is so funny because I chose the word investment, and anyone who knows me knows they would not trust me with $1 to like do the right thing with it. So I do not mean investment in the sense at all of a financial investment. What I'm thinking about and what I thought about immediately in these life cycles and the decisions you make and navigating your next course of flight, as you so beautifully say it, I think about the decisions I had to make at some of these pivotal moments to move from one chapter to the next, which oftentimes are really difficult decisions to make. And I know, Sarah, you just made a big one professionally, and they're really difficult decisions and you agonize over them in the moment, but you make them because you are investing in the long game of your life. So either you're making a pivotal decision to, say, in my case, when the kids were 3 and 1, leave my corporate job, which was kind of an ideal job at Johnson & Johnson. I had spent a lot of time in marketing and PR and branding and in creative environments over the course of the beginning of my career. And I had landed at the in-house global design studio for Johnson & Johnson, working on all of their consumer brands that you have in your home, you know, from Neutrogena to Band-Aid to Johnson's Baby to all these, products that you know and trust that are in your life. And I love working with things that are, hands-on. And there I was, but I had these 2 babies and my husband started working in early morning TV and it was complete chaos. And I waved the white flag and I quit my job and I walked away from that. And so that was a turning of the page and turning to a new chapter, but it was really an investment in my family and saying, you know what? I do believe women can have it all. I do believe that we were raised with no glass ceiling thanks to all of our mothers. God bless them for all the hard work they did burning those bras, right? And I think as a result of that, our generation of women feels like we should be doing it all because we can have it all, and that we're also trying to do it all at the same time. And there are moments where I haven't been able to do it all at the same time. And I've had to acknowledge that. I've had to own that and make a decision that's the right decision because in the long run, it will pay off. But in the moment, it feels like a sacrifice. So that's leaving this job because in the long run, my family and my relationship with my husband and my relationship with my children will be better and stronger later if I make this decision now, even though being in the playground with a 3 and a 1-year-old all day may not feel that way, right? And so there are so many moments in my adult life, really starting from Vanderbilt, really starting from now 30 years ago, because I just turned 48, believe it or not, where that has been kind of a guiding principle for me, is this notion of investing in something that will have value later, whether it's a relationship or it's career or it's family, or it's the decision to live in a certain place or a certain school that you choose for your children, that does pay off later. And that's why I chose this word around this word investment, which I don't know if my parents will ever hear this, but they are laughing so hard that this is the word of all the words that a kind of daydreaming writer would come up with to talk to you
Can
about.
I ask you, Shark, and Christina, when you think about that time of making those decisions, with that word investment, were you clear about the long-term gain? When I first talked to you about being on this podcast, Sarah and I are sort of at that phase with this podcast, and we have careers and families, and it's a lot of time. It's a lot of creative energy, which is fabulous, but it is an investment. And, was this sort of a close your eyes and let's go for it hope? Or were there certain things you knew about yourself to know the investment was worth it in the long run?
I think it's really hard, right? Because when you're in these moments, you look at your life as like a spectrum, as a timeline, right? And kind of where do you sit on it right now? And then where do you want it to go? And will this deviation from the course you were on before, right? Because you were both on a course before you decided to do this podcast, right? So this podcast is a bit of a deviation from whatever course you were on before. It's awesome, by the way, and I applaud you for it.
Thank you.
Think that I don't know that you can always see the end, and I'm not a 5-year plan kind of person. I can't think that way, but I do believe that you would have regretted not chasing this idea. Mm-hmm. And so you're chasing it right now. You're taking not small steps, but actually very big steps to make it real. And a lot of people don't take those steps. They get as far as, we can't make it work. And then they kind of step backwards. You've crossed the threshold. You're in it now. We're here. We're recording. This is happening. And so you will never regret making this decision, because even if it doesn't go any farther than this episode, I hope I'm not your last. I hope I don't take this thing down. But you'll never regret the what you've done so far, and you will learn from it. So I think you have to be like willing to only go just that far and have that be enough. I also think it's really, I bring up our moms, and I didn't mean to make light of the burning of the bras, but it's very true. And my mom was actually just explaining the burning of the bras to my 15-year-old daughter on spring break, which is so awesome to hear her generation talking to my daughters about what they really had to stand up for, and what we still need to stand up for, by the way. But in my own mom, I saw her reinvent herself multiple times and she still is, in terms of her own career and her own her relationship to her professional life, and when she had to make sacrifices in and out of that, and be it, not at full gear professionally for periods of time, even though she really kind of, I think, wanted to be, because she was making choices for us at home. And then saw her go through periods of like enlightenment where she was totally crushing it in really, really big corporate jobs. Like in her 60s, she would leave my older sister and I kind of off her resume because it was like she could say, well, I have 2 kids in college, but she was talking about my younger siblings are in college. And meanwhile, she's a grandmother of like 3 kids, and she would just sort of like leave us off of her resume because she was still like totally crushing it at work and working with all these people that are like, 30 years younger than she is. And so I've observed my own mother go through these choices and dip in, dip out, and have always respected her so much for her own professional growth that I think it totally emboldened me, first of all, to step away from my job when I was 35 and know that that wasn't the end, and that I would be able to get back into whatever the next step was. Yeah. And I knew that because I had observed that. So I think, don't underestimate the power of influence that you're having on your own children just by chasing this dream, not to mention all the other things that you're doing as working moms.
Well, and I know that we used the word deviation earlier, and I think that just knowing you and the work you've done with Boombox Gifts and 3 children's books, and I can't wait to get into some of that too, but it's all been sort of an integration, I think, of like if you had to take a break at your career to be with your kids more. And then there's sort of inspiration for very much a part of your children's book writing. And it's like it's all integrated. And sometimes we don't know at the time that that's going to all piece together. Just the way in college, I would never have known that we were going to do this today. But I think that's what Sarah and I feel very fortunate. And I know not everybody has that, but to kind of keep that part of what's meaningful to our identities and our passion, just like our moms, which you're saying, it's an integration really. And you don't know where the next course is.
I love a lot of things you said. I love what you said about the chapters. I think we, like you mentioned, we equate that to flights. I know some people equate it to the seasons of their life. I really appreciate what you said at the beginning about how we feel like we can do it all, and we feel like we should be doing it all because we can do it all. But it's okay to be like, you know what, I can't, that's not my season right now to like be the boss hog, whatever the highest role is at the business. You know, I'm just really thriving right now doing whatever it is. And maybe it's not as glamorous as that job. But I wouldn't mind to ask you, listening to about that, because obviously we're career driven from the get-go out of college. What do you think of those seasons has been your hardest time?
It's funny. Oh, that's a great question, Sarah. I actually feel like we tend to look back from this vantage point and feel like everything was so easy when we were younger. But I remember turning 25 and feeling very, very lost. In that, to me, 25 felt like you no longer met someone and asked them in the first couple minutes, where'd you go to school? Like that was no longer an appropriate icebreaker because you're that far out of school and you're that far removed from it. But you really haven't totally found like solid ground footing professionally. And then personally, looking around and seeing like friends were really kind of like pairing off, and some even starting to get married, and some doing really grown-up stuff like buying condos or buying homes, and that there was this like threshold to adulthood that I didn't really feel like I was ready for. And so as much as I could say, oh, it was definitely those early years of being a mom and sorting that out, actually those early years of being a mom meant that I had ended up with the love of my life, and that didn't totally look like it was going to happen for a period of time there. And it wasn't so sure that we were going to really make our way back to each other after all of these circuitous paths we were on. So that had happened, and I know I would wake up today and feel like he was the one that got away if that hadn't happened. So I'm thankful for that. So it meant as an early mom that I had not only ended up with him, but that we had created the family that we had dreamed of. So if all I had to do now was, you know, get through the potty training or whatever it was in order to be in this family, then how dare I say that was the hardest time for me? It couldn't have been. Like the harder time was not knowing if all of those things were actually going to happen.
The uncertainty.
And so I think that period of my, like, that 25-year-old self, I do wish I could just whisper to her, it's going to work out.
Oh, God, I love this.
And it's going to work out. It's going to work out the way it should, and just be okay with that and be here, you know? Yeah. And not to say I didn't have fun in my 20s. Believe me, I had a lot of fun. I was having a great time at 25. But in the back of my mind, I was doing a lot of math. I was like wondering about these sort of deadlines that are, you know, kind of looming out there that aren't real, but that you impose upon yourself. So I think that was probably the hardest time.
I think there's a lot of 25-year-olds that would listen to this and be like, thank God somebody is giving us like a shout out of like how hard it is. I remember that.
It's the quarter life crisis.
It really is.
It's the uncertainty. It's like you said, there's so many choices and your flock is always changing.
Yep, for sure. I love that. I think that's so refreshing because we just think it's easy to think back on
and
that.
There's a lot of pressure, I think, on kids now, too, as I know that was sort of the case for us, too, in college of you got to figure out what your job's going to be and what you're majoring in. And it's like there's a lot of that. How do I even know? And do I follow the guy? Do I change the state? It's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's not all, keg stands and perfect bodies and like the people are worrying about things in their 20s.
Well, you're also giving us permission to know if you make a choice and you need to make another choice, that's also okay.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And that is where, some of those pivotal choices and those investments were made for me was in that period of my life too, where I think I was about 26 years old when then Willie was in Atlanta, I was in Boston. We both had good jobs and we were back together and we were figuring our relationship out after like a 3-year break after college. We decided that no, we were meant to be together and we can figure this out. But now we're in different cities. And it was kind of like a staring match of, okay, is one of us going to move, And I moved. I left this great job. I had great friends. I had a great roommate. And I moved to Atlanta and gave all of that up in the fall of 2001 to invest in our relationship and to say, this is the guy, this is worth it. I'm going to start all this over again. And I didn't really have any friends down there. And it felt like very lonely, but it was absolutely the right choice. It was the right decision. Meanwhile, he worked for CNN at the time in sports, which meant he worked at night and on the weekends. So I was often out with his buddies waiting for him to get off work at 2 a.m. So it all worked out, but that was one period of time where I had to put the relationship first. Yeah. And, make that move. And I think that's a lot of people in that young time of life are deciding, like, do I just move for this guy?
Yeah.
Haven't I been taught as a woman not to do that?
Right.
And
yeah.
So you kind of have to reconcile, this is my life. It's one very big, complex myriad of things. It's not a clean little pie chart where this section is equal to this one and everything's going to map out perfectly. Mm-hmm. It's not. It's organic and it's moving and it's changing all the time. And you have to prioritize different people and different things at different points in time and just trust your gut.
I love it. When did you, after, you were home with your children in that season, when did you, I don't know if itch is the right word, or when were you like, you know what, I'm ready to dive into something, a new chapter?
It was so cool because I think that none of the things that have happened in my 40s would have happened, first of all, if I hadn't been 40. If I hadn't had the life experience up until that point that got me there. And then secondly, had I not quit my job and spent a couple of years home, because first of all, we should say this openly, it was an absolute luxury financially to be able to do that as a family. We had not been in a financial position before that point where we could live without my income or live the way that we were used to living. So there had to be that shift where we could make it work financially that I could be home. And so that was a gift. And I feel like if you have that gift, in a 2-parent family where one parent can step away from their profession and you can still support yourselves financially, that is a gift. And I was able to take that gift and use it. And that was a really rewarding period of time. In that period of time, as a writer, as a creative writer at work, I had always worked in marketing environments, branding environments, creative environments where I was a writer by trade. So I was all of a sudden left with nothing to write at work. And so ideas just started to percolate in my mind. And that became the manuscripts and the drafts for my children's books. The first 2 books that I published are pretty much the first drafts of both of those stories that were written around the time that my kids were 3 and 5. And I said, I'm going to go to Starbucks. I'm no J.K. Rowling. It's not like I was, sitting, writing Harry Potter and coming up with the next great novel. But I did carve out coffee shop time when they were both going to the same preschool and I could drop them off at the same time every morning for at least a couple of hours, and said, I'm going to, as a gift to myself, write these down. So that happened right around the time they were 3 and 5. Over the next couple of years, I was trying to knock on doors and get someone to read my work, not to pitch it necessarily, but to try to learn and understand how picture books are even made, the same way you guys had to learn and understand how a podcast is made. And that was a couple of years of process. In that time, my dear friend Amy, who was Erika and my big sis at Vanderbilt, turned 40. And that is the first Boombox. My girlfriends from our sorority were gathering for her 40th birthday, and we decided to make her a memory box and to try to track down 40 people in her life to write her a letter. And that was the original concept for Boombox. There were no photos included. It was just, please write Amy a letter and tell her what she means to you for her 40th birthday. And I organized that over email. All the letters came into me over email, and then we found a lacquer box, and I had to find the cards that would fit inside it and format their messages to be able to print them onto these cards fed through my printer at home, and then placed inside this lacquer jewelry box. The process of putting that together for her was so emotionally rewarding for me that when I got on the plane to bring it to her for her 40th birthday, I wouldn't even put it in the overhead compartment. I sat with it on my lap. It was that valuable to me, and it wasn't even my life story. It was hers.
But it was your baby.
I couldn't wait. So I knew on that trip when Ozzy, who's one of our friends from Vanderbilt, said on the taxi ride, hey, this is a thing. Why did we have to make this ourselves? This should be a thing. Shark, this should be your thing. And she was right, because my whole life is measured in my relationships. And so here, this box of memories, which was also a creative exercise, which my background is in helping other brands come to life and helping to craft narratives, craft stories, design packaging, name companies, name products, do all this creative exercise around other people's brands and other people's products. All of a sudden, here's this thing sitting in my lap that maybe it should be a brand I should try to bring to life. What would I call it? How would I do this? And luckily, I had someone to call who was Todd True, who's my old creative director from Interbrand and Johnson & Johnson. And we had worked together as a design and writing team for many years before I quit J&J. He was still at J&J, but ready to move on. And he happened to call me the same year and say, maybe we should go into business together. I'm ready to leave corporate America and get back to the work. Because what happens when you're in a design role is you get very senior in an organization and you end up managing all the other creative people, and you stop being a creative person. You sit in a lot of meetings and you have a lot of designers that work for you, but you're not actually designing anything anymore. So he was ready to step back into that real designer role. And he said, what would we name ourselves? And we said, well, True Geist sounds pretty good. That's easy. Those are our names. So that was easy. And that was the easiest logo he ever designed. And then I said, well, wait, I've got this other idea. So can I also do this? And he said, yeah, let's do that too. So we kind of shook on it. That became Boombox. And every check that I made at True Geist helping clients with their brands, I would deposit into the Boombox checking account and started the business and bootstrapped and self-funded the business for the first 6 years of operation. And then I just so happened to, in that period of time, get a meeting at Random House and sell my first picture book. So those 3 things happened all in the year that I turned 40. And none of them would have happened if I hadn't made these previous kind of scary decisions that ended up being investments in all of these other things. Even if it's like the investment on making the girls' trip, right? Which feels so hard when you're like juggling a family life and your friends are like, let's have a girls' weekend. and you start going through the list of reasons why you can't go on a girls' weekend because there's soccer or there's this or there's that, or there's no one to drive to this or that, or it's going to be expensive to hire the sitters and expensive to take the girls' trip. So maybe it's not, that's too much to spend, or you're going to have to get the flight, and all of this feels overwhelming. Meanwhile, these are your friendships. These are your people. These are the people that knew you before you were this person. And you do have to invest in those relationships and invest in those friendships. And so having done that over time with Amy, who was still one of my closest friends when she's turning 40, made that boombox happen, because we were still in each other's lives. And so that's again where I feel like it's all kind of meant to happen if you just let life happen to you a little bit. And then when you get to these moments where it's time to shift the chapter, you make the decision, you make that investment, and you go.
I really want that. Like, this couldn't have happened unless I had turned 40 to be like my bumper sticker or something, because you've summed up what it takes. You have to live these experiences. You have to learn to trust yourself. You would never have done this. Your 25 self wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have been able to do it. You didn't have the experiences. You didn't have the connections. So that is just such a lovely toast and cheers to people turning 40
and also the resiliences that come from the mistakes or the discomfort of it. I think sometimes people think if I'm feeling this fear or it didn't go the way I wanted to in the short term, what's wrong with me?
Right.
And I think to see that it all comes together to help us navigate is so true. It's scary.
I mean, and in those experiences, did you ever have something that maybe you felt like didn't go like you wanted? Or can you think of something that maybe was a failure that also helped you get to your 40-year-old self, whether it be when you were home or...
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like every day I have little versions of failures every day. And failure, I think, is a really interesting word, right? Because to me, failure is completely relative, right? So the way you define a failure is totally different than anyone else because it's relative to your own expectations for yourself. It's also relative to the things that you're looking around. What Joneses are you keeping up with, right? So say for the podcast, is it a failure that you may not have as many listeners as somebody else's podcast? Hell no, look at you. You're here. You're making a podcast. Like, success. Done. Like, you've gotten it. The mics are on, right? So you can show up in any room you're in and that you put yourself in. And yeah, you're going to find ways to fail because you're going to look at other things and you're going to judge yourself against them. And they will look like failures because of that. Or you look at, well, the alternative is this wouldn't exist at all. So if this didn't exist at all, what would that look like, right? And then its mere existence is a success. So I can put a book out, which is so vulnerable. I think the most vulnerable I feel professionally is when I put a book out because a boombox is a product. It lives in an ecosystem with a full team of people. It has customers, it has guests, it has people that have to participate in it in order for it to be a successful gift for your best friend's 40th birthday or your mother's 70th or whatever it is. It succeeds because other people make it happen, not just me, right? With a book, of course, I don't illustrate, so I'm not totally alone because Tim Bowers, thank God for him, is my illustrator. So we're both on the cover. Both names are on the cover. But if that book flops, ultimately, I do feel like that's my responsibility. But then I could sit with one 5-year-old for half an hour and we will laugh and we will have the best time and we will have a connection and we will become buddies and we will high five. And that 5-year-old will ask me what the next book is going to be. and I'll go home and say that was the best day of my career. We say this thing in my family, who's better than you? Like, when you're kind of like crushing it, my dad or my mom or, our siblings will be like, who's better than you? And the answer is nobody. Nobody's better than you.
I love
right?
that.
But so it's kind of like a look at you, you got this. Who's better than you? And so like there's who's better than you moments that are just me and one 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
But I could have walked into that bookstore and seen that there were only 3 families there for that book signing and felt like, oh my gosh, this bookstore had me and I didn't bring, there weren't enough people interested and only 3 families came. And the manager of the bookstore probably feels like this was a waste of her time. And, oh gosh, I feel badly that I'm not bringing enough of a event to her store when she asked me to come. And it was so generous of them to invite me. This is what goes through your mind. And then you walked in the bookstore and here's 3 families and we're going to have an awesome time together. And so I have to always look at the alternative is this didn't happen.
And I also
and if
think,
it didn't
Christina,
happen, what a shame,
Well, and this is who you are. I mean, you put such purpose in a meaningful way into whatever you do, whether it's a relationship or a book. And I know enough about your books to know it's real stuff. I mean, I completely respect what you're saying about the vulnerability of putting yourself out there. I mean, I know the titles about the Buddy's battery and the beep, beep, beep and desensitizing to calm. We're talking about that on our podcast.
Oh, yeah.
With struggle and grounding and beep, beep, beep. And that to me is also the integration with Boombox of everything is about relationship and connection and all those different chapters that are as important as a 3-year-old as a 75-year-old about how to walk into a room with new people you don't know. We all feel the same thing. And I think you said that beautifully earlier, that we're all a lot more connected than we realize.
And I love that thank you, by the way. You're so kind. I feel like I just want to come in here and listen to you guys tell me nice things and
get on over here.
Okay.
Come on in.
I might fly down there. Everything's going to be
please
okay,
do.
right?
Oh, we're in downtown New York. We were hoping you would say that. We're here, actually.
You are?
No.
Oh, gosh.
I knew you two would love each other.
You said something, Erika will help me through this because I sometimes stumble upon these profound thoughts. But when you were describing about shifting my question from failure, which I so appreciate, I really feel like some of the things you were saying are things Erika has kind of been teaching me through the podcast, which is finding the value in what you're doing and how you were just talking about when you go to that bookstore. If you only had 3 families, you see the value and the time with just being able to connect with 3 families. Whereas if I'd gone to the bookstore, I'd been like, where the hell is it? Like just taking a moment. Yeah. I think that might be something else that you couldn't do at maybe 25, but like understanding the value and what you're doing with your books, what you're bringing to your audience and making that connection. It's just such a sign of, I don't even know what the word is, but it's like finding the value. You don't need other people to validate because you have such a strong belief in what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and it's tapping internally to the meaningful connection of whatever is right there in front of you.
Yes, for sure.
With intention.
With intention. And in the now on all of that.
I know. It's a beautiful example of all that.
It definitely is. It definitely is.
And especially, Christina, since you're such a proven success, like hearing all of that from you, it certainly helps me just remember these hard days.
I know.
Do it day by day.
I know. I really was listening very intently to that part about the bootstraps and all that.
It's easy to see success and think, oh, they just must have that thing that makes it so easy. But the bootstraps are a big part of anybody's success. Even as a parent. I mean, gosh, it's not pretty.
No, it's definitely not.
But it's meaningful.
Not, for sure.
Yeah. And I think we kind of train ourselves to like look elsewhere. And your point is a good one about the validation, Sarah, for sure. I also think we also tend to like look elsewhere that if we only do this, it will be figured out. Like someone else has the answer. So like with the podcast, for example, you probably sometimes have these thoughts of like, well, if we only had this figured out, it would all work, right? But actually, you're supposed to figure it out. You're supposed to go through the steps. You're supposed to misstep. You're supposed to have hard days. You're supposed to have the journey. And so you can't hitch your wagon to someone else's and just like go along for a ride. You have to actually get out there and pull your wagon and do the work. And I think sometimes people feel like they don't even try to take the leap of faith to pursue a new idea because they don't think they're capable because so-and-so did it because that so-and-so is a different person than me. So-and-so did it because they just got up every day and decided that they were going to keep going and that they weren't going to quit. Mm-hmm. And so ideas are easy. Execution is hard. Mm-hmm. And there are days when you don't maybe want to do it, or you don't want the responsibility, or you kind of want to say, why have I brought this upon myself, But you got an idea in your heart that you want to pursue, and you wouldn't feel right if you didn't give it a shot. And so I think in flight and in thinking about these investments in whatever it is out there, whatever a listener is tinkering with right now in their mind, in the back of their mind, I just always try to say, break it down into the smallest possible pieces that you can. It's like the same thing you would say to your kid if they're struggling with studying for the big exam. Break it down into small pieces. What are the small parts? What are the small steps you need to take? And are you capable of taking those steps? Of course you are. Do you actually want to wake up and do it? Or were you thinking maybe someone else would come along and do it for you and make it easier? Well, guess what? Then, maybe it's not for you. Because none of this is all that glamorous. These are the glamorous days where, I just sit around and talk about it. Instead of, you'll find me kind of in my kitchen some morning saying to my husband, I'm feeling a little lost today.
Yeah. Well.
And we all have those too. So thank you for giving me this community to know that you all are out here.
Oh my God.
Gosh,
right
privilege.
Here.
So Christina, we do ask our guests at the end of the episode, if you could explain where you are in your current life flight.
Folks, this is your captain speaking. We have reached cruising altitude. And we will be here for as long as we possibly can. So yeah, I'm trying to keep things steady and cruise along a little bit and just chill out here. I don't need to climb any higher. I'm good. I don't want any turbulence. I like where it's at. So let's go ahead and bring out the beverage cart, turn off the seatbelt sign. Maybe I'll treat myself to the package of pretzels and a glass of wine.
Love it.
I love it. I just have to say one more thing. I mean, you talked a lot about investments in your relationships, and just from this brief time together, you seem like you would be such a wonderful friend to have. So it seems like you've really found an amazing flock, and I bet the things they would say about you are pretty amazing. So thanks for being on this show with us and sharing those amazing stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so proud of you both.
Well, your voice will certainly stay in my head and in my heart every step of the way.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina.
If anyone is looking for me, the easiest place to find me online is just ChristinaGeist.com. That's it. You'll find a link to my books, a link to Boombox, and a link to True Geist, and also a link to an email button.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Love you.
Okay, love you.
Bye, girl. Bye. I really meant it when I said about the bumper sticker. I love so many of the things that Christina touched on, so much about just where you are and kind of, I guess, knowing yourself or when to make choices that are going to be good for you. I mean, I felt like that was kind of the takeaway.
Yeah.
How would you?
Well, I think the fact that she chose the word investment and throughout her career choices and all the different decades of her life and courses of flight, she comes back to relationships.
Always.
And I think that she dug deep at 25, 35, all those big decisions she made to return to a long, meaningful relationship even, and leaving her other things that were meaningful with her friends and her apartment and all that. She had to dig to a place inside herself to really know what relationships, and not only to others, but to herself, how to just trust that.
Yeah.
And that if the short-term investment had to change, there was something in her like inner soul that knew to go for it.
Yeah, and like I love how she said, like when she chose, you know, to leave where she was for a man, you know, how even her own self told her, like, we've been conditioned not to do this thing for men. But sometimes as we circle back to the end, you're not looking for external validation or external improvement. You have to learn
I think we
to
also,
trust yourself.
going back to her mother and the bra burning talk, and I mean, I lived this for 5 years. I did long distance with my husband now, but at the time wasn't, because I was really lucky to have an opportunity to have a career where I had to balance that as much as the relationship. But I think women are fortunate. You're the same way with your career. We work really hard to create something meaningful in our jobs or our friendships or wherever we're living. And then if we're in a dilemma with another kind of relationship, it is a risk. And there's no right or wrong answer.
I like that. You know, there's no right or wrong. You don't need like approval from society, you know, dig deep. And I like that. Think about maybe what the investment is. What a cool word.
I didn't know today we'd be talking about that on a podcast.
No, of course not. I didn't even know we'd be doing this podcast a year ago.
That was such a helpful way to make the investment. Like, no matter how it turns out, I'm investing in it because this is the purpose for me in this moment. And tomorrow it might be a different purpose. She's an inspiration for sure.
I loved it. Well, thanks for having that connection with her. I mean, talk about connections.
I'm the lucky one.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Erika.
Thanks so much for listening to us today on Connections in Flight. Would love to hear back from you. Please feel free to email us, leave feedback or comments.
We'll be back next week with a new word. If you want to discover more about us, please find us in our socials, and all the links are in the show notes.
Please be advised that the information discussed on this podcast is not professional therapy. If you are triggered or activated, please don't be afraid to seek professional help.
Ample. Hee hee.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, that's on. Don't touch that.